Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Emily Schrader, and coming up on today's newscast. To invade or not to invade, Israel weighs the formal launch of a ground incursion into Gaza to eliminate Hamas. Israel has confirmed that Hamas released 2 elderly hostages last night, while over 220 remain in Hamas captivity. French President Emmanuel Macron landed in Israel this morning for a one-day solidarity visit with Israel. Day 18 of the war with Hamas. The IDF has reportedly told the government that the IDF is fully prepared for the military operation in Gaza and reportedly is urging that the ground offensive begin sooner rather than later. This is amid reports that the U.S. is urging that Israel delay the ground offensive until more hostages are released and humanitarian aid is in place. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
According to a New York Times report, the White House wants Israel to delay its ground operation into Gaza to allow more time for negotiations to release hostages held by the terrorists and to allow time for humanitarian aid to reach Palestinians in the Gaza enclave. In recent days, Israel has allowed at least 3 convoys to enter Gaza carrying humanitarian aid through the Rafah crossing with Egypt. The IDF repeated its calls for people to leave northern Gaza, including dropping leaflets from the air. It's estimated that 700,000 have already fled, but hundreds of thousands remain, and Hamas has urged them to stay. The IDF says it's ready to launch the offensive to eliminate Hamas rule in Gaza. According to multiple Israeli reports, the army is urging the war cabinet to begin the ground offensive in the Gaza Strip sooner rather than later. After 17 days of airstrikes, the IDF has told the government that it's fully prepared for a ground offensive in the Gaza Strip and believes it can achieve the goals set out for it, even at the risk of heavy casualties to soldiers. The Israeli Air Force has so far carried out strikes against more than 10,000 targets in Gaza belonging to Hamas and other terror groups, including over 400 overnight. There have also been IDF incursions into Gaza.
במהלך הלילה נערכו פשיטות של כוחות שריון וחי"ר. הפשיטות האלה הן פשיטות שהורגות חוליות מחבלים שנערכות לקראת השלב הבא שלנו במלחמה. זה פשיטות לעומק בקו המגע. הפשיטות האלה גם מאתרות ומחפשות כל מה שאנחנו יכולים לקבל במידע לגבי הנעדרים והחטופים.
Speaking from a naval warship off the Gaza coast, Defense Minister Gallant made clear that the offensive is coming.
המשיכו להיערך להתקפה כי היא תגיע. אנחנו נערכים ביסודיות, זאת תהיה התקפה קטלנית, זאת תהיה התקפה משולבת מהיבשה, מהים ומהאוויר. עשו את העבודה שלכם, תתכוננו, אנחנו נפעיל אתכם.
Regarding the 220 confirmed hostages held by Hamas and other terror groups in the Gaza Strip, the army says it's been preparing for the possibility of rescue operations amid the ground offensive and believes that an offensive may actually pressure Hamas to release further hostages.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative, available on the web, Android, and Apple.
The 2 elderly Israeli hostages released last night by Hamas in Gaza are back in Israel, united with their families and in good health. The U.S. and Qatar played a central role in the release amid rumors of the potential return of a much larger group of hostages. From ILTV's Devo Klein.
Nurit Cooper, 79, and Yocheved Lifshitz, 85, were released from Gaza into Egypt late last night. They were then transferred to the IDF, who brought them to an Israeli hospital for examination. Lifshitz told reporters that she does not know where she was held after being taken into Gaza from her home in Kibbutz Be'eri during the massacre of October 7th.
אנחנו מרוגשים, שמחים ומאושרים מההודעה הרשמית ומזה שסבתא שלי, יוכבד ליפשיץ ונורית קופר, גם שתיהן קיבוץ ניר עוז, חוזרות אלינו במהלך באמת הומניטרי, אני פה בים סוף ואנחנו מצפים להם, ואנחנו מצפים להמשך השחרורים של כל החטופים שלנו פה מהקיבוץ הזה וכל החטופים באופן כללי, ופשוט מקווים שהיא בסדר, שבריאותה טובה, ואנחנו ניסע עכשיו לראות אותה.
The U.S. and Qatar have been leading efforts for the release of hostages. In a call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, U.S. President Joe Biden welcomed the release of 2 additional hostages and reaffirmed his commitment to ongoing efforts to secure the release of all the remaining hostages taken by Hamas and to provide for safer passage for U.S. citizens and other civilians in Gaza. 2 other hostages were released last week, bringing the number of freed hostages to 4. At least 220, including the husbands of the released hostages, are still being held by Hamas. The release of the 2 elderly Israeli hostages came amid reports of the potential release of a much larger group of hostages. This has raised speculation about U.S. pressure on Israel to delay the ground offensive in Gaza. Washington clarified that the U.S. is not asking Israel to abort the ground invasion, but advising it to wait, and that Washington is still fully supportive of Israel's aim to destroy Hamas.
And with us now to discuss the potential ground invasion and the hostage situation is the spokesperson for the Prime Minister's office, Tal Heinrich. Tal, thank you so much for joining us today on what is obviously a very stressful time. Now, we've seen reports that the U.S. is hesitant about a ground invasion. Is that true? And what is the U.S.'s motivation behind a request to delay?
Delay is not a right word in what pertains to Israel and a ground invasion. There will be a stage 2, stage 3 for this operation to dismantle Hamas. We have a very defined and very just military objective that we have put in front of us, and that is to bring to an end to the Hamas regime in Gaza. They will have no governance bodies, and they will not have a military wing. This is what we will do. And we are very set to accomplish this mission. Now, the Israeli government, the unity government, and the military brass are taking into consideration all kinds of different variables when they are calculating what's the next best step to take and when. There are certain conditions that are being taken into account. The hostages situation obviously is making all these decisions more complex, and there's the timing issue. And on top of that, it is true, we are consulting with international counterparts because, as you know, some foreign nationals are also being held captive in Gaza now. So delay is not the right word because these are very complicated, calculated considerations. Israel will act very decisively and judiciously.
Now, there are some U.S. officials who have expressed doubts about Israel's ability to effectively eliminate Hamas for good, what you stated the goals were. What is the Prime Minister's office official response to that?
Once the government and the military, the high-ranked people in the IDF will say that we have reached our goal, then the war could be over. But as a nation, and as a government, we took this decision that we can no longer live next to an existential genocidal threat called Hamas. The security of the Israeli people is the top of minds for everyone. And we will not live in an October 6th kind of state. This can never happen again. So what we will do is to make sure that what happened to us, such atrocities on such scope and such scale of brutality, will never occur again. For that end, we're acting in Gaza, and once our leaders decide that the mission has been completed, then we can talk about stage 2 and contingencies for Israel, and also in what pertains to Gaza and the Palestinians. But everyone must understand that, as President Biden said, terrorism is a dead end. It's a dead end. It will lead you nowhere. We cannot let terrorists get away with what they did with impunity, because if we do so, and if we send a soft and weakened message, then terrorists all over the world will just get the wrong notice here. they will understand that they can hit civilians again and again, and you and I will have this conversation again. So we don't want this to happen. We will act very decisively so it doesn't.
Right. Now, Arab media and some of the Arab states even have claimed that Israel's intent with asking Palestinians to seek shelter away from their homes is in fact an effort to ethnically cleanse Gaza. I'm wondering what your response is to this.
This is not true. This is not true. We do not want to hurt civilians. What we are calling on them is to evacuate from the north to safer havens in the south of the Gaza Strip for humanitarian aid also awaits. Did we ethnically, just to use this term again, did we ethnically cleanse our communities in the north and in the south of Israel?
It's a great point.
We did not. We also don't want Israeli civilians in harm's way. This is why we evacuated so many communities, 200,000 people. No, we don't want them to be up north in the front lines and what could, we hope it doesn't, but it could potentially develop into an all-out war with Hezbollah. And we don't want them to be close to the border with Gaza in the south. Well, they can't anymore, even if they wanted to, because their houses are burned because of Hamas. They butchered them. They butchered these people.
Finally, regarding the hostages released so far actually all still have family in captivity. In addition to that, there's been talk of releasing only those with dual nationalities. This has faced some criticism because it seems as if that you're valuing some lives over other lives, over the Israeli nationality exclusively. Is this a strategic PSYOP campaign by Hamas? Is this part of their objective?
Nobody should buy into this Hamas propaganda. The only reason, Emily, why they released 4 women so far is due to mounting international pressure. And guess what? More pressure is coming. We should not be mistaken. Hamas did not change and turned overnight into a human rights group, right? They are the same terrorists who butchered, beheaded, raped, tortured children in front of their parents and parents in front of their children before they killed them brutally. So these are the same people. We don't know anything about the condition in which these hostages are being held right now. We call on the international community to back us up in the demand that the Red Cross would pay them a visit and examine them. And we call on Hamas to unconditionally release them. More international pressure is coming. And just as the world rallied behind, if you remember, in 2014, there was the abduction of the Nigerian schoolgirl by Boko Haram, and the entire world joined together in a huge cry to set them free. This is what we expect from the international community to do, to back us up in our demand that the hostages will be released.
Well, we're out of time, but I want to thank you so much for your candid answers, and I'm sure you'll continue to keep us updated on the ongoing war in Gaza. Thank you, Tel.
Thank you, Emily.
Yesterday, in response to denial of the Hamas massacre on October 7th, the IDF held a special briefing with international media to screen nearly an hour of uncensored footage captured by Hamas on the body cams of the terrorists. As someone who attended the briefing myself, words are not enough to express the horrors we witnessed. There were audible gasps and crying from nearly everyone present. Additional footage released yesterday on social media of Israeli interrogations of Hamas confirmed the barbaric scenes showed to journalists by the IDF. Here's what they showed.
Footage released by Israeli security services yesterday has gone viral across social media as multiple Hamas terrorists confirmed the crimes against humanity committed by the terror group. In one clip, a captured terrorist admitted that they were directed to do whatever they want with Israelis.
انه اقطع راس بني ادم او اسبي واحد جثه انه سبيه وميته واعمل فيها وازني فيها وهي جثه يعني مش بني ادم بيعمل الشغلات اللي زي هيك ممنوع.
Clips from 6 separate investigations were released, with all of them confirming that Hamas ordered them to kidnap and kill Israeli civilians. In one of the testimonies, the terrorists stated that Hamas had offered a home and a $10,000 reward for anyone who kidnaps an Israeli.
قديش المكافأة قالوا لكم؟
شقة منزل بيت $10,000
اللي بيجيب كل أسير باخذ شقة ومنزل؟ مين قال لكم إياها هاي؟
كانوا يحكوها في القسام يعني.
In another, a terrorist confirmed that these hostages are and were being used as human shields. In all 6 of the interrogations, the terrorists admitted that what they had done was not permissible under Islam.
Hezbollah drone attacks were thwarted, and the IDF took out a rocket launching cell as fighting continued along the northern border. 2 Israeli civilians were injured by rocket fire as the evacuation of Kiryat Shmone and other northern cities continues. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
In the latest clashes in the north, the IDF intercepted 2 Hezbollah drones. In the first incident, Iron Dome air defense system knocked out a suspicious target that entered Israeli airspace on the northern border. Several hours later, the IDF said Iron Dome shot down a drone that entered Israel from the sea. The army also took out a Hezbollah cell as it prepared to fire rockets into Israel from southern Lebanon. The IDF has carried out strikes to eliminate 20 Hezbollah cells in South Lebanon since the start of the war. Hezbollah is paying a heavy price for its choice of attacking Israel in the north. Funerals for the dead terrorists are being held in Lebanon. 29 Hezbollah terrorists and 6 Palestinian terrorists have been killed in the exchanges, and several Lebanese civilians and a journalist were also reported killed by Israeli shelling. At least 6 Israeli soldiers and 1 civilian have been killed in Hezbollah attacks. The city of Kiryat Shmone is being heavily targeted by the terrorists. 2 people in the northern city were wounded by shrapnel, and a house suffered damage after a missile attack. Israel is still in the process of evacuating the residents of the city.
I'm taking my whole family. It's myself, my wife, 3 children, my dog. Won't leave my dog. For how long? I don't know. It's until things will settle down here in this area.
The Defense Ministry ordered the evacuation of 28 communities, including the city of Kiryat Shmona, that are within 2 kilometers of the Lebanese border.
There's something that I want to make very clear, that I'm not running away. I don't think none of the residents here in the Moshav are running away. We are leaving to make sure that the army could do a better job without taking into consideration the casualties of the civilians. So we're not running away. We are leaving to let the army do its work.
As the war continues, Israel has seen a stream of high-profile diplomatic visits from President Biden to UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and today French President Emmanuel Macron. ILTV's William Sharon has the latest.
This morning, French President Emmanuel Macron touched down in the Holy Land for a visit to show support for Israel. In the Hamas massacre of October 7th, 30 French citizens were killed, and another 9 are still unaccounted for. Macron told Israeli counterparts that France is standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel against the scourge of Hamas terror. In a press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu, he proposed the international coalition which fights against ISIS should be broadened to include the fight against Hamas.
Cette cause est juste, point final. Le Hamas est un groupe terroriste dont l'objectif même est la destruction de l'État d'Israël. C'est aussi le cas de Daesh, d'Al-Qaïda, de ceux qui leur sont associés dans l'action et dans l'intention. La priorité, votre priorité, mais aussi celle de toutes les démocraties et de la France, est avec vous de vaincre ces groupes terroristes.
In his meeting with Israeli President Herzog, Macron also emphasized that he had warned Hezbollah not to get involved with Israel and further escalate the war. During his short one-day trip, Macron also spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister Benny Gantz, and former Prime Minister Yair Lapid before heading to Ramallah to visit with the Palestinian officials.
Well, in addition to French President Macron's visit, the Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, also visited Israel to meet with Israeli officials over the war. While most European leaders have expressed solidarity with Israel, is the support for Israel's right to self-defense really there? Here to speak with us about Macron's visit and the European approach to the Israel-Gaza war is Daniel Shadmi, spokesperson of Elnet Israel. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to start off by asking you your thoughts on the motivations behind Macron's visit, given his ties to Qatar. Would you say that this visit was out of solidarity with Israel or even political opportunism?
First of all, I think Macron's visit comes, we know, after a series of many European leaders and obviously the United States president and his team. I would not call this political opportunism, as many countries are involved in this crisis. In the attack, over 42 countries had either their citizens kidnapped or killed during this October 7th horrible attack on the south of Israel. And we must remember as well that there are currently French hostages held in the Gaza Strip by Hamas. And from what we've seen, the few of them that were released in the last few days were done also by efforts by Qatar. So I believe there's a big international pressure, and rightly so, to release all the innocent civilians that have been kidnapped by Hamas.
Now, unlike many world leaders, President Macron maintains some degree of diplomatic dialogue with Lebanon, Egypt, and Qatar. Could this be beneficial to ensuring the hostages are released? And what role could France play in this?
So, as I said previously, we know that Qatar is involved in releasing the hostages. What we think about Qatar and its role in destabilizing the region is one thing, but they have been involved in that. One other thing is ties with Lebanon and countries in the region is very important for our European partners, as they can pressure for the situation not to escalate to a regional conflict. It's very important to know that Hezbollah now has been attacking Israel in an unprecedented scale in the past weeks. And it's very important for our European partners to pressure and to help for the situation not to escalate even further. Now, Macron's visit right now he has met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he has called for a coalition against Hamas, as there was one against ISIS. This is a clear message that shows how Hamas and ISIS are alike by their actions, and how much it's also a threat to the European continent and to the Western world in general.
Now, shifting from the diplomacy conversation to what's happening on the ground, France actually banned pro-Palestinian demonstrations due to their violent nature, and there's been a surge of anti-Semitism in France. How is France coping with the issue at home, in addition to trying to help de-escalate the situation?
So, speaking for myself and also on behalf of the organization, I am not a French citizen. I will let French citizens hold their government accountable to its decisions. But we've seen a big rise of anti-Semitism in Europe and in France as well. And it goes back to what I was saying just earlier. It's very important for governments to inform their citizens and to educate them and to prevent anti-Semitic attacks. There's one thing criticizing a government's actions or some policies, but calling for the hatred of Jews and the destruction of Israel, it's a clear anti-Semitic statement. Hamas's actions on October 7th were not acts of resistance. They were killing innocent civilians just because they were Jewish. At Elnet, we launched a campaign to hold these people accountable, Hamas, because of these crimes they are clearly crimes against humanity. And if they were to happen within European countries, they will be called so as such as well. So it's very important to prevent these anti-Semitic public statements and big protests, but it's in a way important also to educate the citizens onto what these statements lead to more violence, to more divisions between people instead of leading to a solution.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for today, but I want to thank you so much for joining us to speak about this European support for Israel.
Thank you.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected tonight throughout the country, with lows of around 21 degrees Celsius or 66 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, clear skies and an expected spike in temperatures set to reach highs of 30 degrees Celsius or 89 degrees Fahrenheit. More than 1,400 babies, children, elderly, men, women, soldiers were murdered in cold blood by Hamas terrorists on October 7th, and over 220 remain in Hamas captivity. The scale of tragedy is so large that we cannot even mention all of the names right now, but we will slowly share their stories and ensure that their memories live on. Not a single Israeli is not impacted by the horrific events of October 7th. Today, all of Israel continues to stand together and mourn. Well, that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to the ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, iltv.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.